Now, this video is going to focus on a lesser known system, which is called the lymphatic system. People have always heard of lymph nodes and tonsils, but a lot of people really don't have an idea of what they do. Your lymphatic system is actually part of your cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system is what many people call their circulatory system, but cardio referring to heart and vascular referring to the different vessels that we have inside of us. And the lymphatic system is also part of your immune system. Your immune system, your lymphatic system, your cardiovascular system all go hand in hand. And so in the case of the system, we have something called lymph inside of our body. And our capillaries are the thinnest blood vessels we have. They're just one layer of simple squamous epithelial tissue. And they're under a lot of pressure. So imagine having a water balloon that's just full. And you guys know if we keep filling a water balloon and keep filling a water balloon, that water balloon is going to pop. Well, we don't want our capillaries popping. So every second of every day, our capillaries are under high amounts of pressure. And so therefore, imagine having a water balloon that instead of popping, water began to leak out of. Well, that's what happens in a lot of our capillaries. So it talks about how the fluid accidentally escapes. We don't want a lot of fluid leaving our plasma because then our blood will basically dry out and it's not going to flow like it's supposed to. But at the same time, our capillaries are under such high pressure, we don't want our capillaries to pop. So like I said, imagine having a water balloon that you just keep filling up and you keep filling up, but instead of popping, water began to ooze through the balloon in order to decrease pressure. Well, that happens in our bodies. And we have to be very careful because this can cause our blood to become too thick. Well, as soon as it leaves our body, it's going to pick, or as soon as it leaves those capillaries, it's going to pick up trash. So the job of the lymphatic system is to be able to collect this escape fluid. It's just like you spilling water and you take like a towel and you soak that water up and then you take the towel and you wring it out and the water comes back out. Well, that's kind of like what your lymphatic system is going to do. There's no special pump for this. Your lymph vessels are actually specialized valves or specialized veins that have adapted throughout evolutionary time. And we just simply, as long as this water gets collected, our body's not in a really kind of hurry to get this water back into our bloodstream. So we have no special pump. So just everyday muscle contractions will push on these valves and push on these lymph veins. And they are made from smooth muscle, so they peristalse. They also will pulse in order to help move this fluid along. So what is lymph? Well, lymph is water. And in science, we like to be really, really, really specific about certain terms. So when water is actually in your blood, we call that plasma. As you know, about 55% of our blood is liquid, and that liquid is what we call plasma. The other 45% are what we call your formed elements, which are your red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So whenever you see plasma, that lets you know that water is actually in your bloodstream. Well, when water leaves your bloodstream, or just the water that's inside of our bodies, that's what we call interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid is basically just water that's just kind of sloshing around inside of us. You know that our organs are wet, and so the water is inside, is in between the cells, and we call that interstitial fluid. Now your cells are giving off waste products, so interstitial fluid is considered dirty because as the cells give off waste products, these waste products are going to collect inside the fluid. So it's still water. It's just water found in a different place. Now, if the water accidentally leaks out of a blood cell, so it goes from being plasma to being interstitial fluid, the job of your lymph vessels then are to absorb some of that extra water. So when that water gets absorbed and it's in a lymph vessel, it's called lymph. So it's still water. Okay? It's just the three different names let you know they're in three different places. So like I said, if water is in a blood vessel, it's called plasma. If water is just kind of sloshing around inside of our organs between the cells, it's called interstitial fluid. And if that water is inside of a lymph vessel, it's called lymph. Now, what is a lymph node? Well, if you think about interstitial fluid, like I said, this is considered to be dirty water. So think of your bathtub or think of your shower or your sink. You have a faucet, and when you turn that faucet on, water comes out. Well, think of the faucet as being a blood vessel. As long as that water is inside that faucet, it's clean. But as soon as you turn that faucet on, that water gets hit by air, that water splashes on the shower or the sink or the bathtub, and it's going to pick up any dirt, dust, or any particles that are in that. And most of us don't put water inside of our bathtub and then start to drink it unless it's an emergency, because we would consider that water to be dirty. And then we have a drain that water leaves through. And when water leaves your house, for most people, it goes to a water treatment plant where it gets cleaned up and then it gets recirculated again. Well, our lymph system is very much like that. So the water that's in the pipes coming to our house, it's clean, it's been filtered, that's your plasma. Then when we turn the faucet on and it comes out and, any dust, dirt, things like that, that's like your interstitial fluid. And then it goes down the drain to go to the water treatment plant to be clean. That would be like your lymph. Well, in the case of our bodies, our water treatment plants are our lymph nodes. These are huge filters. Just like, a lot of refrigerators have water filters in them. So when the water goes into the refrigerator, it gets filtered before it goes through the nozzle that a lot of us have in our refrigerators to get clean water. Or think about your air conditioning filter. Air gets sucked in through and it gets filtered and cleaned before it goes into our air conditioning ducts and gets pumped right back out. So that's what our lymph nodes are. Lymph nodes are actually small organs made from reticular tissue. And anytime you see reticular tissue, think of reticular tissue as a spider's web. You guys know that spider's webs are sticky so things can stick to them. Well, that's what our lymph nodes are. These are huge filters. Now, as humans, we cannot throw away our filters. If your air conditioning filter gets dirty, you change it, you throw it away. If your water filter has to be changed, you throw it away. So our lymph nodes actually have little cells inside of them that help keep them clean, and we're going to talk about that later on. Okay. But all of your lymph vessels will take this liquid, this lymph, to a lymph node in order to be filtered. So this is how our body cleans the water. So like I said, when you turn the shower on or the tub and it hits the sink, it's going to go down the drain. And unless you have a septic tank, like I do, this drain then takes that dirty water to a pipe and it carries it to a water treatment plant. And the water treatment plant filters the water and cleans the water so it can be reused again. Well, that's how your body works in the case of your lymphatic system. And since your lymph nodes do filter, this is why a lot of times when you're sick, the doctor will test your lymph nodes. They're going to feel if your lymph nodes are swollen. And some common lymph nodes we have are our cervical lymph nodes, which are the ones that are found in our neck. That's why a lot of times when you go for a checkup, the doctor feels your neck. They're feeling your lymph nodes. Because if you have a pathogen, something like a bacteria, a virus, then hopefully some of them will get filtered out by your lymph nodes. And it can cause your lymph nodes to become infected. And when things are infected, they swell and they're sore. And so this is why when you get sick, your lymph nodes are often sore. But in a way, that's a good thing, because the bacteria or the virus is now trapped in one place instead of moving throughout your body. And so it makes it easier for your white blood cells to go to your lymph nodes and help destroy those bad guys, help destroy those pathogens. And so we do have lymph vessels. Now you can see in this picture, the red represents your arteries, the blue represents your veins, and the green represents these special vessels that we call lymph vessels. Lymph vessels they start small. They're very, very similar to capillaries so that they can absorb, just like a sponge, in order to get this water into them. And then they will merge and become larger, just like capillaries become venules and venules become veins. They get larger and thicker as we go. Now, all the lymph vessels in your lower body, just like if you think about your street, all of the drains in your house will go into one tube. And then all the tubes coming off of all the houses on your street will go into a larger tube. And then all the tubes from your neighborhood go into an even larger tube. So the tubes get larger and larger and larger on their way to the treatment plants. Well, your lymph vessels are the exact same way. And eventually, they all will become two large lymph vessels. All the lymph vessels in your lower body will eventually merge to form what we call your right lymphatic duct. And this will add water back into your bloodstream out to your internal jugular vein. And it's actually your right internal jugular vein. All the lymph vessels of the upper body will eventually form what we call the thoracic duct, which dumps the water back into your right subclavian vein. And the reason that they get dumped into the right side of your body and into the veins, remember, veins carry blood back to the heart. And with the exception of the pulmonary veins, most veins are carrying what we call dirty blood. It's deoxygenated, it has different waste products in it. And so by dumping them into veins on the right side, we know that this water will run through the pulmonary loop. The pulmonary loop is where we take liquid in our blood to the lungs and get oxygen into them. We're going to assume at this point in time that this water is deoxygenated. It has no water molecule or oxygen molecules in it, just what we call dissolved oxygen. So we're going to put it into the right side of your heart in order to run it through your pulmonary loop. Now, like I mentioned in the case of our lymph nodes, since these are filters, think of your hair as filters. And you guys know you have to wash your hair because dirt gets trapped in your hair. Well, your lymph nodes are going to trap substances. So we have a special type of white blood cell called a lymphocyte. And lymphocytes are phagocytes, which means that their job is to basically eat things. And so lymphocytes get their name because they live in our lymph nodes. And they're basically like vacuum cleaners. They'll go and they will suck up cells that don't belong to us. We also have, so lymphocytes are also an example of what's called a macrophage. There is no one cell called a macrophage. Macro meaning large, phage means to eat. You have several different macrophages in your body. Lymphocytes are just an example of one of them. Now, in the case of our intestines, our lymph vessels have an added job to them. So we have to give them a special name. They're called lacteals. For those of you who recognize the root word lac, like lactose, that's referring to milk. Well, our intestines are dealing with the absorption of nutrients. And we have to be real careful because there might be some stomach acid left over. So in the case of our small intestines, these will secrete a milky white base. That's where the lac comes from. Because when you mix acids and bases together, you know that it's neutralized. So they are going to absorb this lymph, but they're also going to mix it with this milky white base first to make sure that any acids that might be remaining from our stomach get neutralized before it passes through these systems and has the potential of damaging red blood cells. Now, with major lymph nodes, you have over 500 lymph nodes throughout your body, and they tend to be in clusters. And so in the case of the ones in your neck, because these are your cervical vertebra, we call these your cervical lymph nodes. You also have your submaxillaries. These are actually in your mouth, under your jaw. Axillary are the ones that are in your armpits. Ladies, one of the signs of breast cancer, metastasized breast cancer, are cancer cells that get into our lymph nodes. So this is why females, when you go to the doctor, a lot of times they'll lift your arm and they'll start to really poke around in your armpit. I don't know if this happens to men. I'm not a male, but I can tell you that as a female, my doctors do this. And this is to feel the lymph nodes. If your lymph nodes are really hard, that's a sign that there might be tumors growing inside of your lymph nodes. And so when you, like I said, when females go to the doctor, they really poke around in our armpits. They're feeling what we call our axillary lymph nodes. We also have cubital lymph nodes. These are found in our knees and in our elbows. And then our inguinal lymph nodes are found in our groin region. Now remember, lymph nodes' job is to filter things. And so sometimes when you're sick, your lymph nodes can get infected. That's why when you are like really sick, sometimes like when you bend your arm or you bend your leg, it hurts. Or like if you touch like the bottom of your jaw, you might have these sore spots where you're pressing on a lymph node. Now, your tonsils are actually types of lymph nodes. And what a lot of people don't realize is you actually have 4 pairs of tonsils. But a lot of times when people talk about their tonsils, these are the tonsils that they're talking about. Okay? Your palatine tonsils are the largest tonsils you have, and they are located in the back of your mouth. And what you're seeing here in this picture is a person with really inflamed, infected tonsils. So like I said, most of the time people don't realize that when they talk about tonsils, that they actually have more than 2 tonsils. So the palatine tonsils get their name because the palatine bone on the roof of your mouth. These are the largest tonsils, and these are the ones that get infected the most. Now, back in my day, I was born in the 70s, people get their tonsils taken out left and right. And people who have had their tonsils removed tend to get sick more often because we now have a better understanding of our lymph nodes and how that these are filters. So if I remove them, it's like not being able to vacuum my house. Dirt is just going to pile up. But some people still have to have their tonsils removed. If your tonsils get infected enough, it's just like taking a knife and cutting your skin over and over and over and over and over again in the same spot. You know that scar tissue will build up. Well, scar tissue cannot filter. So it is possible that the lymph vessels, the palatine tonsils, can get infected enough that scar tissue builds up in them, and they're not going to work. So therefore, sometimes doctors will, it's not as common anymore, go in and take a person's tonsils out. And when somebody has their tonsils removed, these are the tonsils that they're actually having taken out. So why have them removed? We also have what's called the lingual tonsil. And anytime you say lingual is referring to your tongue. And the lingual tonsil, very short and sweet, is located at the base of your tongue. It's actually located way back in the back by your back teeth. And so this right here, let me get this to work. This right here is the lingual tonsil. And this is the tooth. And this person has a form of tonsillitis. This tonsil is swollen. Sometimes, I don't know if you've ever been so sick, it feels like your tongue is swollen. Well, your tongue's not swollen. The lymph nodes under your tongue is swollen, and it's pushing your tongues up. We also have what we call your pharyngeal tonsils. These are what people commonly call your adenoids. And your adenoids are tonsils, and they're found up on the roof of your mouth near what we call your nares. Okay. You guys all know we have that thing that hangs down from the back of our throat. That's called the uvula. And behind the uvula, we have two openings, one that goes up into each of your nostrils. You guys know when you take a deep breath, when you breathe in, you can feel air going into your mouth. Well, this is where the air enters. Well, we do have two lymph nodes there. They're called your adenoids or your pharyngeal tonsils. And so this is why sometimes when you have a sinus infection, you feel stuffy, but when you go to blow your nose or sniff, there's no mucus. Well, the reason you feel snuffy is because these lymph nodes are swollen and they've basically kind of covered that hole, so you just have a harder time breathing. The fourth type of tonsils you have is what we call your tubal tonsils. Now, as a fetus, we had gill slits. And in mammals, those gill slits form what we call our eustachian tubes. We have a hole, it's way back in the back behind our back teeth, that lead up into our ears. And that hole is called the eustachian tube. And that's what controls air pressure up against your eardrum. Well, we do have lymph nodes there, and they're called your tubal tonsils. And so this is why sometimes when you are sick, it feels like, or it sounds like you're hearing things underwater. Well, if that happens, these tubal tonsils are infected, and they're actually closing the hole that leads up into your eustachian tube. And the eustachian tube puts air on your eardrum in order to increase pressure. For those of you who know about anything about drumming, you have to tune a drum just like you would any type of equipment. And there's keys. If you pull the drum skin too tight, you can cause it to tear. But if you don't pull it tight enough, it sags. It's not going to vibrate the way that it's supposed to. Well, this is what happens when your ears pop. When you go deep underwater or high up in the air, you increase pressure. And it's like you pulling on a piece of paper. You can actually cause that to tear. So by moving your jaw or chewing gum or swallowing or opening and closing your mouth, that causes this tube to pulse and helps create a suction that sucks extra air out of our ear chambers. And this is why our ears pop. And the last gland I'm going to talk about is called the thymus gland. And it's really not part of the lymphatic system. It's part of the immune system. But for some reason, people tend to put it in with the lymphatic system. Your thymus gland is an example of what we call a childhood gland, meaning it does most of its work in children, people before they reach puberty. As a teenager or an adult, most people's thymus glands are no longer working, which is kind of a shame. But as a child, we have this wonderful gland, it's found in our neck, called the thymus gland. And it secretes a hormone called thymosin. And thymosin allows children to make antibodies. Now, I have a video that talks about antibodies as part of the immune system. But antibodies are weapons that we use to basically block bad guys. Viruses and bacteria have to be able to attach to our cells in order to infect our cells. And so they're going to have like little grabbers. They're going to have little pinchers that they can grab hold of our cells with. Well, antibodies are arrows that I can shoot at a bad guy and block them. They don't destroy the bad guy, but by blocking the bad guy, it's basically like they clog the pinchers. So the virus, the bacteria cannot attach to our cells. So since children have this thymus gland, they're able to make all these different types of weapons to use. So this is why it's real important for children to get as sick as possible. You know, when you become a parent, daycares are going to be your best friend. Your kid will be sick all the time, but the sicker the child, the less sick the adult will be. Since children have the thymus gland, they have the ability to make all these different types of weapons to use against pathogens, viruses, and bacteria. You'll find that children get sick a lot, but they don't stay sick for very long. That's because anytime you get sick, that means your body has never seen this bad guy before. Well, because children have the thymus gland, they can immediately make whatever weapon they need to fight it. Well, as adults, we can no longer do that because our thymus gland doesn't work anymore. So this is why adults, we don't get sick that often because there's not that many diseases out there that are new. But when we do get sick, we stay sick for a long time. Because when we get sick, this is something that our body has never seen before, but we can't make new weapons. We have to look at all the different weapons, all the different antibodies we have, and make what we have work. And it takes a little while for that to happen.